Babysitters of Reddit. What are the weirdest rules parents asked you to follow? Story 1. Get ready for a creepy story. I was 13 and was babysitting my neighbor's kids. It was my first time, so the parents walked me through all the rules about the bathroom and TV and food and bedtime, etc. Just as the parents were taking off for the night, the mom came back in and whispered to me, "Don't go into the basement." As a teenager in the 80s, my mind went to all of the scariest movies that had basements. I avoided the door to the basement all night until I had to put the kids to bed. Then I walked slowly to the door and put my ear against it. I heard what sounded like whimpering, and then it sounded like sad laughing. I ran to the couch and started watching TV to get my mind off it, but then I heard something fall in the basement and knew someone was down there. I really don't know how I got the courage and stupidity to do it, but I went over and opened the door. The whining instantly got louder. I went down just 3 or 4 stairs so I could peek down, and I saw a goat. Not a ghost, a goat. As soon as the goat saw me, he started bleeding loudly. It scared the crap out of me. I went upstairs and the goat was still bleeding loudly, so much that it woke the kids. The oldest girl came out and said, "Did you open the door to the basement?" I said, yeah, why? She said, "When you do that, Carlos thinks you're gonna feed him and he starts yelling." Thank God I knew it was a goat first, because if she had said that before I went down, I would have thought Carlos was some kidnapped person in the basement who would yell for food. It became very funny to me. The mom came home and I told her what happened and she almost died of laughing. They were repairing the goat pen and had to keep him in the basement for a few days. I still remember every moment of that night vividly. We now have a Discord. Check out the server in the link in the description. Story 2. The mom had me put her kids in their car seats and sit in the driveway with all the car doors open while she just hung out inside the house. 5 hours of me standing in the driveway watching them sit inside their car. Never returned. Edit. I meant that I never returned to babysit for her again. Not that the mother had mysteriously disappeared or something. As for people asking me why I didn't take them somewhere, she specifically asked me to just sit in the driveway with them. I also didn't have my license yet, so I couldn't have taken them anywhere even if I wanted to. The kids were twins who were 4 years old, I think. They were weirdly well behaved and didn't complain about what we were doing. To this day, I have no idea what she was doing inside or why she didn't just let them play in the yard. I'm just as confused as you are. Story 3. I used to babysit for this family when I was in high school in the 80s, and they had no books or reading material of any kind, except that there would usually be 2 sections of the Wall Street Journal and a running magazine lying around. No books. Anyway, once I went over there and the mom told me 9 times, begged me pretty much, not to eat the box of Nilla wafers that were in the cupboard, because she needed them for a recipe the next day. Begged. I was like, okay, got it. They're totally safe because I don't even like vanilla wafers. She kept mentioning it, and it was the first thing she asked me about when they got home. Story 4. I used to regularly babysit one of my younger cousins. At nap time, I had to put her in a zip-up pajama with feet. I then had to duct tape the zipper down and duct tape the wrists in a way that weren't restraining, but she couldn't pull her hands into her onesie. If I didn't do this, she would pull her hands and dig in her diaper. Always. My aunt got tired of cleaning poop-covered walls regularly. Story 5. Hippie family. The 2-year-old had no bedtime and no rules. She can eat what she wants, no bedtime, and if she falls asleep, leave her wherever she crashed. The parents came home at 2:30 to a toddler eating chocolate cake on the couch with her preferred American pickers on TV. And that's fine, apparently. 6 months later, the mom is very pregnant and asks that when the baby is born if I could wrangle the toddler while the mom gives birth in a bathtub at home. The 2-year-old was to be in the room, watching, while I explain what's happening. I left that evening when the parents came home, fried chicken in the toddler's hand, keeping up with the Kardashians on TV, and denied their request to come sit. As a 20-year-old, I was not prepared to see the mess of someone else's home birth. Story 6. I babysat my 4 cousins once, aged maybe 8 to 12. One night, they all asked for me to read a story, so I happily obliged. When I told my aunt, she replied, "They're much too old for that. Why did you do it?" Well, if the kids want a story, I'll read them a story. Why the hell not? I've read stories to my 35-plus-year-old husband before. In the car, though, not before bedtime. Edit. Contrary to what some of you have said, my aunt isn't evil and isn't someone who would put her kids in front of some trashy reality show. They're an upper-middle-class, well-educated family. In fact, my uncle collects amazing, mostly European graphic novels, and the kids have always had access to culture, books, museums, concerts, etc. I think my aunt just meant something like, "You didn't have to do that, plus how odd from them." She doesn't have any filter and is usually quite blunt. Maybe the kids never asked her to read to them? Then again, yeah, in the end, it just sounded wrong. But chill. Story 7. One had me feed her 1-year-old only from a freshly opened baby food container. If she ate only 2 or 3 spoonfuls, I was to throw it away, and when she wanted more in 15 minutes, I was to open a new one. I thought it was so she would finish her meal and be full for a while, but she said it was okay to feed her every time she wanted. I would probably throw away 5 or 6 jars in a 2-hour sitting. They cost more than I usually made for sitting. Story 8. Not a rule, as I only went there once, but a very odd request. I used to work housekeeping at a hospital. A doctor that was frequently on the floor that I worked on asked me if I could watch his kids on Saturdays. He had 3 toddlers, ages 2, 3, and 4. His wife didn't work, but wanted time to go shopping and get her hair and nails done. I totally understand, as my son was 4. I was also allowed to bring him. I get there early as the doctor is getting ready to leave. He says he's cooking breakfast, and while he gets the kids fed and dressed, could I help change his wife's tampon? She'd drunk a lot the night before and was completely passed out and was leaking and messing up their sheets. He's a doctor. I told him I should work for someone for more than a few minutes before I go rummaging in their private parts, and that I'd tend to the kids if he tended to his wife. What I really wanted to do was leave, but the kids would be home alone with their hungover mother, so I chose to finish cooking and stay. He went upstairs and sent the kids to the kitchen where I was putting food on plates. After a little while, he popped his head in and said it was a short day, he was done upstairs, and he was leaving. I never met the wife. He came home at noon, gave me $100, and I just never spoke to him again. Story 9. Only 2 hours of reading time. To be fair, the mom was a librarian and her 2 kids were adorably nerdy. They had an entire room filled with books, and even then we'd make trips to the library from time to time. The rest of the time was supposed to be outside or doing some activity. It was a super sweet deal too, because she paid for not only her kids to have a pool pass, but me as well. So we basically went every day all summer, and we would play in the pool. Story 10. When I was about 14, some friends of my parents asked me to babysit their 9 or 10-year-old son who wanted a boy babysitter. When I got to their house, the mom told me that her son loved poached eggs and asked me to make him a poached egg on toast for dinner. She quickly explained to me how to make it as if it were something that was really simple and easy. Later that night, after wasting half their eggs in a hopeless effort to make a poached egg, I asked the kid if he liked scrambled eggs. He said he loved scrambled eggs and ate them without complaint. When the parents came home, I apologized for using up their eggs. They laughed and seemed to appreciate the effort, although the mom explained it again and insisted that it was really simple. I'm almost 40 now, and I still suck at making poached eggs. And it cracks me up that the mom thought a 14-year-old should be able to whip one up based on a few instructions. On the other hand, as a parent, I appreciate the hell out of that kid. Story 11. My mother asked me to stop by the house to meet her 2-year-old son a week before I was supposed to babysit him for the first time. I pulled up to the house and saw that the young boy was standing at the glass front door with a t-shirt on and nothing else. I go in, and I must have given the child a strange look because the mom started to explain that her son doesn't like to wear pants, so they let him run around pantless with no diaper on, though he isn't potty trained. I told her that this made me uncomfortable and asked if I could put pants on him when I was watching him, and she got upset with me and said they don't like to make their 2-year-old son do anything he doesn't like to. So they let him run around without pants on, which unfortunately means he goes to the bathroom on the floor since he won't wear a diaper and he isn't potty trained. Story 12. One woman I found on care.com was just generally pretty weird. Some of the weirder things were, only let the kids have 3 spoonfuls of peanut butter each. The boy might want to throw softballs at me, just try to catch them to avoid getting hit. If he doesn't want to brush his teeth, just hold him down and do it for him even if he's screaming. Also, both times I babysat, she didn't tell me when she'd be home and didn't show up until the middle of the night. Totally wasted. The first time, she forgot to pay me, and I was too nervous to say anything, so she had me pick cash up from her mailbox later in the week. She shorted me $5. The kids screamed, hit, fought, and made messes the whole time, and wanted me to chase them around the yard with sticks. I did not. I also stopped going there. Story 13. Refused to let their kids eat raw veggies for absolutely no reason. They never told me this, so I gave the kids ages 5 to 7 raw, washed, and cut broccoli with some ranch for a snack. They were happily eating as the mom was getting ready for a party. She walked by, saw the kids eating the broccoli, took it away from them, microwaved it, and said they like it much better this way. The kids did not like it better, and even they thought it was weird. I was then instructed to never give them raw veggies. I could understand this if they were toddlers still learning how to chew, but these kids were plenty old enough to chew broccoli florets without choking. Story 14. One parent said I had to read a Bible passage during dinner and for a story time. I also had to use Christian discipline methods. To this day, I still have no idea what that meant, but if the kids acted out, I would just say, "Would the Lord like you doing that?" I had to make the kids pray every 15 minutes. I thought it was a bit much, but gotta respect it. Another one said I had to do this really complicated skincare routine. Maybe the kid's skin is sensitive. No, the kid was fine. The mother was just obsessed with that whole glass skin fad. Story 15. I really never had any rules to follow, but I did have one terrible mother. The mom asked me to babysit her 3 kids overnight. As I was in high school, I couldn't do it, so she said she could be back by 9 p.m. I figured it was fine and let my mom know, even though they only lived a few houses away. Well, the kids were great. We played around, we watched a movie, I fed them and put them to bed. 9 p.m. rolls around and the mom was nowhere to be found. She hadn't left a number to reach her, and I figured she was just running behind, so I cleaned up and watched some TV while waiting for her. 10 p.m. Not home. 11 p.m. Nope. Finally, at around 12 a.m., I call my mom, I explain what's up, that I'm tired and I have school in the morning, etc. She agrees to come and stay at the house with the kids till their mom shows up. Turns out she didn't come home till around 10 a.m. the next morning, long after my mom had called CPS. She gave my mom $20 for 16 hours of babysitting. None of the neighborhood kids were allowed to babysit for her after that. Story 16. When I was 14, the neighbors asked me to come in for an interview as a babysitter. They were on the couch and I was sitting in a couch opposite. Every time I looked at the dad, he would shift his eyes down to his lap. Eventually, I looked down on his lap. He was wearing very short shorts with no underwear and his dong hanging out against his leg. Needless to say, I declined the offer. Edit. I found another post about him. I was somewhere between 12 and 14 when this all went down. I may have been younger. This was almost 20 years ago. So when I was about 12 years old, the next neighbor's husband started beating the crap out of her in the middle of the night, kicked her out of the house, then was holding the baby hostage. I woke up to screaming and crying coming from the bathroom as my mom and the neighbor lady hid. "Let me in, Mom," I screamed, terrified. "He's not gonna hurt you, you're safe," some crap along those lines. Mom won't let me come in the bathroom. Crazy boyfriend now has broken a window and says he's going to come in and kill us all. We lived in a crap neighborhood and this was in the 80s. The police said this was a domestic dispute and wasn't a priority unless we knew the guy had a gun. For a good 20 minutes, we listened to the guy hollering that he was going to kill himself, kill the baby, kill us. My mom still wouldn't let me, and my brother, who was now awake, into the bathroom, the only door with a lock. I would also like to point out that this guy had also at one point flashed his dong at me and told me I looked like I was built for banging. Remember, I was 12 years old. Anyway, I finally snuck into the dining room, which is where the broken window was, and also where the phone was. We didn't have a cordless, guys. This was the 80s. I called the police and lied. I told them I heard a gun going off and now the baby wasn't crying. 3 more minutes and there was like a SWAT team on our street. That was one of the most terrifying moments in my life. Story 17. Babysat for a woman who knew my mom. She had 2 kids, both acted like feral animals. They kicked and bit me very hard when I told them no. She had her TV behind a plexiglass thing because they kept breaking TVs. She had locks on the outside of her bedroom door and crib setup that essentially locked the younger kid, 3 or 4 years old, into her crib. It had a top that you pulled down and padlocked to the sides. It was horrific. The kids screamed bloody murder when I tried to get them to listen. Their grandma, who lived next door, came over. Did she come over to help me out? Nope. She gave these kids cookies and talked crap about me for not being able to control them, like it's my fault that her grandkids act like animals. And not the fact that their mother apparently treats them like animals and she herself gives them treats when they have temper tantrums, instead of, putting them in timeout like a normal person. Their mom promised to be back by 9. Important because I was in high school. She wasn't back until 2 a.m. and that was after I started calling all the bars to find her. I was planning to eat dinner afterwards, so I was starving. I called my mom and she ordered delivery for me. The grandmother got upset that she didn't order enough for the kids too and guilted me into sharing it. The mom finally came home, paid me $10 for 10 hours of babysitting even though we agreed on $20 for 5, and proceeded to talk crap about me next time she went out, saying I was lazy and a bad babysitter. She said I should have beat their butts and locked them in the bedroom when they started acting up. Story 18. Years ago, I was a nanny, and the mom told me that they didn't use the word no. Instead, to redirect the child when they were thinking of doing things that weren't nice. Basically, think of PC Principal's mom, and you've got my former boss. Couldn't say that the kids were doing something bad or anything like that. As most of you parents and babysitters can imagine, he was a perfect little demon. The day I quit was when he took a knife off the counter and tried to stab me with it. For his safety and mine, I grabbed it away, which set off the fakest and most spoiled tears you've ever heard. I explained to my boss that I could no longer watch the child because redirecting him to calmly lay down the steak knife was a job for a police officer in a hostage situation, and not a minimum wage college student. Story 19. This was way back in the mid-90s. Remember, before we had DVR and all that jazz, and the only way to see what was currently on each channel was to whip out your TV guide or bring up the TV guide channel on your TV and watch the scrolling bars until you found something decent. In the early to mid-90s, advertisers figured out that the TV guide channel was a great advertising medium and would show ads on the top right of the screen and compress the scrolling shows playing now. The parents wouldn't allow me to turn on that channel because of the questionable content of the ads for things like laundry detergent or PG movie previews. The kids were 8 and 11 and were allowed to watch a very select subset of shows, and those shows were usually geared towards kids 5 years younger than them. Nickelodeon was banned in that house, as were the words shucks, hate, and darn. Story 20. The neighbor I babysat for when I was around 12 had 4 rambunctious boys. The youngest, who was probably 2 or 3, was locked in a dog crate under the kitchen counter when I arrived. She told me to leave him there until they returned, which would have been 4 or 5 hours later. I let him out immediately and called my mom, saying that I wanted to call the police because I thought that that was super abusive. The crate was too small for him to stretch out in. My mom said no, and so I never did. I also never went back there. To this day, I feel guilty and wondered what else those boys endured. Story 21. The mother of the kids whom I babysat for asked me to wash her industrial-sized windows during my lunch break, which was when the kids had a nap, but she didn't pay me extra for it. They were filthy windows because she lived on a high floor of an apartment building, and it was during a cyclone season, so there was lots of dust and rain stains mixed together. Whenever I'd clean the windows, she'd be in the house, on her laptop at the dining table, watching me and pointing out areas I'd missed. I was 18 and very intimidated by her, so I did it a few times. Now I'm 26 and I just can't believe the audacity of her to ask me that. Like, at least offer me extra money or make lunch for me or something. Also, she would always come home and say, "Do you mind if I pay you next time, for this shift and the next one altogether?" And then when the next shift arrived, she'd say that, oh, she thought she already paid me for the previous one. I kept track of the payments and dates in my phone to prove her wrong. I disliked confronting her, but I was a poor uni student, so I definitely stood my ground for that. Oh, yeah, the kids were in diapers until they were 3, and I was required to change them, even though I lightly suggested that they should really be going through potty training. 3-year-old crap is disgusting compared to baby crap. I'm so glad those days are over. Story 22. I'm a professional nanny, and one of the families I worked for had a strict no games rule. Not as in video games, but as in any game that could have a winner and loser. No board games, no tag, nothing. Winning and losing leads to hurt feelings, was their explanation. I'd have to stop the girls anytime they said something like, "I bet I can get to the end of the driveway faster," and remind them, "Mom and Dad said no competition, remember?" Everything had to be perfectly equal or the parents would lose it completely. I fired them as clients shortly after. Story 24. Don't let the children play with the non-believers. They were a super Christian family that I babysat for a few times. One time, the children were looking out the window at the neighbors playing, and I asked if they wanted to go outside and play. And I kid you not, this little 5-year-old looks at me in the eyes and says, "We can't. They are not of God." So freaking creepy. I wasn't asked back after I accidentally said, "Oh my gosh," one time. Apparently, gosh is a little too close to God. Story 25. My sister babysat and wasn't allowed to leave. The parents refused to drive her home until she did all of the dishes. Dishes that were there from the family before she showed up to babysit. She was upset, and when that same family tried to get me to babysit, they were upset that I refused, but I'm not a maid for hire. You can't just make a 14-year-old clean your house because you hired them to watch your kids for an evening. Story 26. When I was about 15, I was asked by a family in my church to babysit for them. I didn't know them all that well. Like, I had never babysat anyone before and have no idea why they asked me. This family had a daughter about a year younger than me, so I figured she wasn't going to be home. I found out not only that she was going to be home, but the primary reason I was there wasn't for her younger two sisters, but for her. I guess she got nightmares, and if she woke up, I was supposed to hug and kiss her. This was quite the shocker to me, and I was really uncomfortable with it, but I stayed anyway. Luckily, she didn't wake up. Incidentally, that couple later got divorced. I think I was babysitting while the mom cheated. He was on a business trip. Story 28. Once I babysat for a kid for a weekend while his brother and parents went for a weekend in the mountains. Kid had done some dumb kid thing and was grounded. Rules: no TV, no contact with other kids. I was explicitly told that I could take him to the playground, but if another kid showed up, we needed to leave. Now, I was a college student. Campus was walking distance, so we went to a couple baseball games, walked around the library, hung out with some of my friends while they day drunk on the lawn. Kid was asleep when his parents got home Sunday night. I got a call the next day from his mom thanking me for taking such good care of him, but lamenting that as a punishment, it was wildly unsuccessful because he couldn't stop talking about how much fun he had and how he wanted to spend every family vacation with me. I'm pretty sure he was overselling my Mary Poppins abilities to irritate his parents and make his brother jealous, but you know what? I'm not going to go out of my way to make a kid feel miserable. I'll follow a parent's rules, but my primary role is keeping the kid safe, fed, and tuckered out by the end of the day.